Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome to the Africa for Palestine webinar series here in Nafal. We've been very excited and waiting for this webinar series to start. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We are
Thank you for
streaming
inviting
live.
me.
Great, great. We are streaming live onto YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. How are you feeling today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm
Can
all
you hear
right.
me okay?
I can hear you just fine. I can hear you just fine. Um, those who are not familiar with our work, we are Africa for Palestine. We are a Palestine human rights organization based in South Africa, but doing work in the African continent. We do work with many other organizations throughout the continent, from your faith-based organizations, churches, mosques, synagogues, to your different political parties, your trade union movements, student organizations, student activists on different campuses, and the broader civil society organization that fundamentally believe and identify with our cause. We work to raise awareness on the African continent on the Palestinian issue, and we also work to drive out Israeli influence in the continent. We started this webinar series about a year back when the lockdown started due to the coronavirus pandemic. We've had very much different people on this platform. We've had faith-based leaders, we had student activists, we had academics, we had Palestinians, we had Israelis, we had Jewish people, we had people from Ghana, people from Botswana, and people from the larger part of the African continent, from different walks of life, speaking about different topics on international solidarity, including Swaziland, Venezuela, Cuba, Palestine, and many other places where there is oppression. Today we are joined by a Palestinian activist, Suhair Nafal, who really, I would not say uh, famous, but well known because she did something that many other people perhaps have not done before. She won a lawsuit against an Israeli soldier. So once again, welcome to this webinar series.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Um, so just tell us in the audience, you were born in Amman, raised in Jade, and you're living in California. How have you kept your Palestinian identity throughout this transition of one place to the other and one place to the other?
First of all, I think most Palestinians who are born, and all Palestinians, I believe, are born into situations and in families who can't help but explain and educate us on our heritage, right? So as a Palestinian, you're almost born to be bred to be an activist. In my situation, and that's not for all cases, I know unfortunately there are, I don't know what the percentage is of Palestinians in the world who are just kind of who have given up and are just not very much into raising awareness. But most of us, I believe, are. I happen to have been born to a woman who was, very much of an activist. My mother, may she rest in peace. So I was from the moment I was a baby, I was bred and I was basically trained to be an activist, but I didn't get into it until later in life. So it was easy for me because of my mother and many of my family members and my community that I was raised in the Bay Area. Palestinians are a proud people, especially because of the situation we've had to face and deal in terms of being occupied. And so it's who we are. It's our very existence is to make sure and be very vocal about the situation in the occupation of our land and who we are, and share our heritage and always teach people about Palestine.
Yes, and there's quite a common code, which is reality, that to exist is to resist. Just to be
Absolutely.
Palestinian, it's problematic to the Israeli state. I mean, also, I'm sure there are difficulties that you're born into a different country, a different culture, in some cases, different religion and so on. What are some of the difficulties of being a Palestinian in the diaspora for yourself?
What are the difficulties? You know, the difficulties are always having that dark cloud over my head that my people are being oppressed, that the majority of Palestinians are scattered all over the world. We are the largest body of refugees in the world. So it just, again, unfortunately, being Palestinian, no matter how blessed you are in life and how privileged you are, it's difficult to be a Palestinian in this world because of the atrocities and the horrific human rights violations that you are constantly reminded of. And obviously, unfortunately, we're not reminded of these war crimes and essentially the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. We're not reminded of that on mainstream media, as you know, right? So I don't just turn on the TV and turn on CNN and I'm reminded of the horrific things that are happening in my country, because we all know that mainstream media is afraid to touch that subject. I'm being reminded of it just again in the mere fact that I'm Palestinian, and it's my existence, and my family members, and we go to family members' homes and sit with aunts and uncles who tell us about the occupation. They tell us about the history of how they lost their homes. Friends' homes who have elderly relatives. You sit and you hear about our culture and how they miss Palestine. And so that in and of itself is difficult to live with. We're constantly being reminded that we are a people whose home was essentially just stolen right from underneath their feet. And so it is. It's always just difficult to be a Palestinian, no matter what.
And we all have different ways of doing our activism. Others are actively protesting on the streets, others are writing general articles about it, others are raising opinion pieces in the media. I mean, there are different avenues and platforms that we practice our activism. But you found a voice in social media. You found an instrument that is working for you. So just take us through how did it start? How did your journey into being a really recognized social media activist start?
Thank you. It's funny. I don't consider myself, I'm small potatoes compared to some of these, activists who are on social media and off social media. So I'm always humbled, and I feel, thankful that I'm being recognized as that. I don't think I give myself enough credit. But again, going back to being raised by a mother who was extremely active in the cause, I grew up, when I was 8 years old, we were brought here to California, and I grew up with this existence constantly, right? My mother always had us involved in activities having to do with Palestinian activism. There was a point when I rebelled in my late teens and into my 20s and 30s. I chose that it was too difficult to be in the world of activism. I saw how much my mother suffered and my family members who are activists. And to be an activist is an emotionally and mentally taxing existence. So admittedly, I was not very political at all. I had it in me. It lay dormant in me for years. And every time I was, again, reminded about what's happening in my country, my blood was boiled, but I just kept choosing to sort of turn a blind eye and I wasn't prepared to get into it because I knew it was going to be emotionally taxing for me. 2014, when I witnessed, the last massacre on Gaza, watching and that was covered a little bit on mainstream media and very much on social media. And at the time, I only had a social media account for several years, and I only had a couple of hundred friends on it. I hardly used my Facebook account, but that was the turning point for me. And I believe so many people in the world, and as Palestinians, I think 2014 Protective Edge massacre on Gaza was a turning point, not just for myself. I believe it changed millions of people throughout the world. And so that's what it took. It took that 51-day war for me to finally come out of hiding. And I just took to social media like everybody did, right? I got on my Facebook. That's the only social media account I had at the time. And I just expressed my feelings, and I shared posts that were coming down my timeline. And before you know it, I was getting a lot of friend requests, and I was requesting a lot of other social media activists. And I didn't necessarily know that there was such a thing as social media activism, right? So I think the way in which I posted and shared my thoughts and expressed and wrote my posts, I guess resonated with a lot of people, and one thing led to the next, and I noticed I started getting a lot of friend requests and followers. And then there was a moment where I felt like, you know what, let me take advantage of all these followers and and friends. And I raised money for Gaza. I worked with some folks and helped some folks out there, that needed aid. And so I thought, gosh, this is an interesting and excellent platform. And as a result, I became this, I guess, sort of, I feel like I am a member of an army. I don't feel like, again, I'm a big name social media activist. I feel like I'm honored to be a member of a social media army that has existed for years, but has now become a bona fide threat, right? And I am just one of many whose sole purpose is to bring awareness and do what mainstream media is not doing. And thankfully it's working. I believe it's working, and I encourage everyone who has a social media account who cares about humanity and social justice to, put out what you can and educate everyone you can and bring awareness to this atrocity. So that's kind of how it started. And gosh, 6 years in, I guess now, 7 years in, here I am. I'm being interviewed by lovely folks like you, and I'm honored, and it's kind of crazy, but that's kind of where it started. And yeah.
And for many people, it's something you take for granted. You're on your phone, or you're on your laptop, or whatever gadget that you use for social media. You react to a video, you watch a video, you like a picture, you respond to a friend. Many other people take it for granted as such. But you have found an effective way, and as you said, you've raised money um, for aid for Palestinians in Gaza. Uh, and is that a real reassurance that, there are those who take it for granted, but there are other people out there whose Facebook post or a tweet really reaches their humanity? Does that reinforce your activism when people show their generosity through your 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 activism?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part?
I'm saying, does it reinforce your activism when people show their generosity through your posts and through your work?
Yes, absolutely. Again, I feel so absolutely honored and humbled that so many people, trust me enough to not only share my posts and become involved, but also donate to the causes and the nonprofit organizations that I support. It's amazing, and it speaks to the reality that there are so many more people in the world who are um, heartbroken over what's been going on in Palestine for the past 73 years. I live in a country, unfortunately, that has still not been woken up. And that's what I'd love to do through my post. I want to wake up Americans, because I know the rest of the world knows what's going on. So it's humbling, and it just drives me to continue to do more of what I'm doing. And again, encourage people out there who want to express their feelings about this horrific occupation of Palestine to just get on social media, whether they have, Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, just on your free time, just get on social media and share stuff. Share things, even if you're not interested in a post, just share it, because you don't know whose timeline it's going to go down, right? I get messages constantly, private messages from strangers who tell me, as a result of my post, they're now very interested in what's going on, and they're messages like, I can't believe the US has been covering this up all these years. Here I'm an American and I pay taxes to this war crime. This regime, Israel, we were you know we were taught all our lives as Americans that Israel is an ally, and that is not an ally I want to support. The indoctrination is there. And so if I wake up one American, every so often, that is worth it for me to continue to do what I'm doing. And again, just I encourage everyone to just use social media as the platform, since mainstream media is not doing us justice.
And going to perhaps the heart of today's webinar, I'm sure you know that you make international news. You made international news. Anyone who supports the Palestinian cause, I'm sure, was cheering for you. You won a lawsuit against an Israeli soldier. Just take us through that in the audience. Perhaps those who don't know what happened, just kindly just take us through the timeline. What happened? What led to it? What happened? What led to the great victory that we all celebrate today?
I guess it was in 2018, spring summer of 2018, everybody was witnessing the Great March of Return, when these courageous young and old Gazans, Palestinians from Gaza, decided that they were going to have I don't know how many months it was, for probably a year-long campaign of standing on the border of Gaza and occupied Palestine, and protesting and bringing awareness, and making sure the world knew what was going on in Gaza, and that they've been under siege for 11, 12 years now, if not more. These protests that were happening every Friday, again, brought a lot of attention, including mainstream media attention, specifically because, once again, I like to call them gang members of a terrorist organization known as the IDF. So that's what I call them. They're gang members of a terrorist organization. And so when you have these gang members, standing in the fields, watching these peaceful protesters, these Palestinians, and sniping them down and shooting them in their kneecaps, and killing them and maiming them and shooting their eyeballs. That was a bit much to take, right? So obviously, every social media activist and non-activist in the world that was watching this was sharing, these atrocities. And again, like I said, some of this news was making it on mainstream news. We all know the biggest story that came out was when the hero, 21-year-old, I think, Razan Najjar, who was a nurse and a medic, who was one of the folks that was showing up to the marches to be ready to help her fellow Palestinians who were being shot and hurt by the gang members of the terrorist organization. We all saw how she went into the field to help a Palestinian, and she was sniped and murdered and snuffed, basically, by the terrorists. So needless to say, I, along with the world, was just shocked and horrified, and just, so angry, but also I was just in disbelief. And that day was just a rough day for all of us. I don't know if I'd even posted anything prior to the post that brought me to where I am now. I think I just shared something along the lines of, Israel just basically murdered a nurse, a Palestinian nurse in Gaza. But then I also, as I was just looking down my timeline, I was watching all these other posts, right? Because I wanted to hear what everybody else had to say about this. So I enjoy looking at posts as much as I enjoy posting them. And I saw a post come down down my timeline by Miko Pellet, who's a Facebook friend. And his post was unrelated to Razan. His post was sharing a post off of the IDF public Facebook page. And that post had a picture of a young American girl standing there in an IDF uniform, proud of herself. And the post caption was basically, it was a promotional post showing that, it's talking about this young girl named Rebecca from the United States and how proud of her they are that she moved to Israel from wherever she was living in the United States at the time, I think Boston, and that she's been with the terrorist organization for a couple of years, and she's now moved on from the educational department of the IDF to the field. And clearly it triggered Miko for him to want to share it, because his caption of this post was something along the lines probably of, how horrific it is that we have these young Americans, joining the IDF, which is completely shocking how the United States allows that to happen. So for me, I thought, wow, look at this, and I took the picture of this young girl and I put it right next to a picture of Razan al-Najjar. And I made a comparison, good versus evil. Okay, you've got this young American who's decided to join the IDF, leave her own country, to join a land, an army that, occupying a land she has zero ties to contribute in the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And then here you have this lovely hero, Razan al-Najjar, who was just murdered by an IDF gang member as she was trying to save the lives of her fellow Palestinians peacefully protesting. And of course, unfortunately, my words were misread and people confused anybody who can read proper English obviously saw that was a clear comparison. There was nowhere that I wrote or indicated that it was Rebecca who sniped Razan. So unfortunately, the post resonated as it is with so many folks, and they just wanted to know. I think subconsciously and psychologically, they kind of wanted to know who the sniper was, right? And they just in their heads decided, oh, this is the sniper who killed Razan. And that misinformation just caught fire and it went viral. And talk about international, that was internationally shared millions of times, evidently. Also by magazines as well, by actual publications, online publications. It wasn't just, shared by individual account holders, Facebook or social media account holders. It was shared by pages as well, actual Facebook pages that have hundreds of thousands of followers. So when I saw it catch fire, so to speak, and go viral, I was like, oh crap, this is bad, And so the next day I just noticed it got bigger and bigger, and I knew that I had to put up another post on my wall, in capital letters, making sure to let everyone know that is not what I intended in that post. It's gone viral. There was nowhere that I said it was Rebecca who murdered Razan. And so that was it. And there were articles that were written about this miscommunication. There were articles written by the Zionists blaming me and saying that I indeed did tell, in my post. So there were lies. But I knew this was going to come back at me. I was not surprised when 2.5 years later, 6-7 months ago, I was coming home just from a walk in front of my apartment, and I just moved back to California from Chicago, so I was just getting settled in and enjoying my life here in beautiful sunny California, and everything was lovely. And I get handed by this stranger, I get handed a $6 million lawsuit from this young woman represented by a nonprofit organization slash law firm named Shurat Hadin, and you guys can look them up and do some research on who they are. I won't waste our time here. Of a $6 million, and you know, for defamation of character, essentially. That I destroyed this girl's, my post basically, not so much destroyed her life. Well, that's what they tried to make us believe, but you know, she was harassed and whatnot, and so you know, that was again, I was shocked and horrified that they're trying to destroy my life now, because who has $6 million, right? But I thankfully, you know, I'm surrounded with, you know, heroes in this cause. I'm surrounded with friends and you know, peers who knew exactly how to point me in the right direction. And long story short, I got a great attorney who represented me. He was up against a battle. They tried to, so this happened 2.5 years ago, and in the state of California, as also in many states, the statute of limitation to sue anybody for defamation of character is only a year, right? This was 2.5 years ago. What makes this story so shocking and so blatantly just audacious, right? Very, very telling of who they are and how they operate, who they think how they can try to control, you know, how they try to control everything, is they're trying to force my court, the California court, to adopt the statute of limitation of 7 years in Israel. So they literally tried to sue me. And by the way, they had 100 other names, blank names on this lawsuit, because they wanted to sue 100 other people, by forcing the California court to adopt the Israeli law. Imagine that. Imagine, think about that. So they wanted to sue me based on Israeli law here in California, in the United States. And it took them 6 months of a lot of compelling arguments and a lot of motions that they sent in, and they were trying to, you know, essentially create miracles for themselves, I guess. And thank God. I mean, thank God that the state of California and this judge basically told them to go F themselves. You know, not in that way, but he dismissed the case, and he allowed us to sue them for my legal fees, which is not easy to do. You know, those types of lawsuits are not easily won, but he did the right thing twice. He dismissed it, and he allowed us to go after her, this young lady who's, you know, who was represented by Shurat Hadin, who raised almost $300,000 for her. So I think she can afford to pay us back or pay me back my legal fees. And so I think that's, you know, the fact that, you know, the whole story is what resonated with everybody. And I think that's why it became an international story, because it's such a unique and ridiculous situation. I mean, they tried to set a precedent and change US laws so that anytime anybody, you know, posts something that they deem is defamation of character, they are welcome to come to our country and sue us based on their laws, you know? So it was just so ridiculous. So that's pretty much the whole story. And it wasn't easy, you know, having to deal with it, having this this dark cloud over my head for 6 months. You know, I was confident that it was going to be thrown out, but I also understand the arrogance of Zionism, and that they, you know, their ways of trying to influence powers that be here in this country. And unfortunately, some powers do have, you know, the non-principled judges, unfortunately, sometimes agree with this ideology. And thankfully, this judge, again, was a principled judge who knew to do the right thing, and who knew to uphold the U.S. First Amendment rights and give me my freedom to speak the truth without being punished for it. So for the first time in a long time, I felt very proud to be an American. As ironic as that feels, right? So that's pretty much the whole story in a nutshell.
Thank you for that comprehensive and feedback on the story. How has this process from 2018 until now, how has it affected your life?
The news broke out, right? We announced this win a little over a month ago. Admittedly, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, being an activist, whether it's on social media or not on social media, is exhausting, emotionally and mentally. While I still cannot and never will take the credit that I could give my fellow activists. I mean, I know so many of my activist friends who have done so much more work, than I have on the ground. Again, I've had the pleasure of having the easiest activist job, and that is just to be on social media. Again, it's still work, but so there was a point about 6 months prior to me getting this lawsuit. Admittedly, I was just sort of starting to check out. I was getting exhausted, and I thought, gosh, I've only been doing this for 5-6 years. How have these people been doing it for years and years, being in the activist world? So I was starting to feel a little defeated, a little checked out of activism. Of course, I would never give up, but I just wasn't into it as much, I just wanted to take a break. And now, I am more invigorated and more dedicated to activism work, than ever. I am pissed, but in a good way, right? I am, they effed with the wrong girl. And so it was for me, it was a sign from God and from the universe that I should never give up or even get lazy or start to get exhausted. There's a lot more fight in me. And I will do this for the rest of my life. And whatever it takes to bring awareness, however I can contribute to the voice of the voiceless, my fellow Palestinians all over the world who are suffering, however I can help them, I'm going to, and I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to making sure I speak and yell and scream as loud as I can and encourage others to continue to bring awareness and become the mainstream media until victory. So that's it. It changed my life in the way that my life needed to be changed, or again, it sort of reinvigorated my love and my passion to continue to be involved in this cause that is, in my opinion, the most beautiful cause and the most powerful cause in the world. So.
And it's interesting to know that how does this relate to you as an individual? I also follow you on Facebook, and I see some of the stuff you post and some of the things you say. But it'll be interesting to know how does that type of life relate to your everyday normal individual life, to your neighbor, to your family, to the security guard in the apartment downstairs, to where you buy food in the shopkeeper. How does this social media activism relate to your everyday normal life?
It's interesting. It's almost like I lead a double life. My everyday life is I'm an American, right? I live among Americans of all different ethnicities, right? So there's no such thing as an American. But I do everything else. I do everything everybody else does. I go to the grocery store. So again, because I live in a country that is not very aware of what's happening in in Palestine and the illegal occupation. It's easy. I just blend in. My family and friends, or well, the majority of my friends are activists. So that's, whenever I socialize with them, whether I'm on the phone with them or hanging out with them, that's just my life. But I don't wear a t-shirt that says I'm I'm a social media activist for Palestine, right? Of course I wear my keffiyeh, but I'm a normal human being living a normal life like everybody else. When people ask me what I do, I tell them I'm an activist for social media, wherever I am, depending on if I'm in a restaurant hanging out with friends that are not that are not activists. Um, Look, again, being an activist for Palestine, or even just being Palestinian, it has its own unique existence, right? Because of who we are. Being a Palestinian who happens to be an activist who all of a sudden became sort of well-known internationally within the world of the Palestinian subject, right? Doesn't change anything. My family and friends all over the world were like, "What the hell's going on with Suhair?" They all found, they all heard about it on the news, and I was they saw me on the news in Palestine, and that sort of that was kind of funny for them. But it's I live a normal life, as does everybody who's an activist all over the world, not just activists for Palestine. I think activists in general all over the world live a pretty normal life until they step into the world of activism, right? So 80% of the time I'm just Suhair. 20% of the time I'm on social media raising hell. or attending events when, hopefully we're able to attend events again after this pandemic is done. Or contributing in any way I can to helping Palestinian organizations, whether they need my help in organizing or whether they need my help in raising awareness. Right now, I am involved in raising awareness for the atrocity, the continued ethnic cleansing and the continued Nakba that is happening in the neighborhood, the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. Again, people can look that up. They can Google that or get on Facebook and understand what's happening there, how this neighborhood of 550 people, 28 families, just a small neighborhood of 28 Palestinian families who have been in their homes, for centuries. The rogue government that has occupied Palestine has illegally figured out a way to evict each and every one of them from their homes. So 550 Palestinians in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem are about to be evicted in about 3-4 weeks from their homes, and their homes are going to be handed over to Jewish settlers who have been paid to be imported onto my homeland of Palestine. Jews from all over the world are going to be handed the homes of Palestinians who have been living in their homes for, centuries. Imagine that happening in 2021. Imagine that. That's the existence of the Palestinians living under occupation. And so I'm campaigning right now, involved in social media campaigning to bring awareness to this. I'm asking all my followers to write letters to our local representatives. And so that's what I do. I try to get involved in any sort of campaign that needs attention.
And you said something very important just earlier on about how you felt a little bit overwhelmed, you felt a little bit tired. There are many other Palestinians in the diaspora. I mean, Palestinians constitute the largest refugee numbers in the world. For those that are finding it difficult to find a voice, for those that are finding it hard to speak out for themselves and to speak out for their people and their country, What message do you have for them?
You know, depending on the level of difficulty. If you say if they're it's hard, it's fine. They're finding it hard to speak out because of being punished, right? You know, I support that. I want them to know that it's okay because we're speaking out for them. You know, if they're under so much oppression that they can't even, um, they can't even express their misery and their difficulties, then not to worry, because that's what we're doing here and all over the world. We're not just in the United States. There's social media activists and non-activists all over the world speaking for them. So, all I can say is just hang in there. It's people, we do this for them. They need to understand that we are doing this for them. We hear them, we see them, we understand their situation. They are not being ignored. And in fact, I think that's why my case was resonated with so much internationally. The hosts that were interviewing me on these TV shows in Palestine were shocked. They didn't have any idea. Well, I thought they would know this already, but they didn't understand how an American, in my case, Christian, because I am American. I mean, I've been here for the majority of my life, so I'm American, right? Palestinian American, but they were sort of really pleasantly surprised that I did what I did, and I am one of million. I don't know, hundreds of thousands, not millions, of Americans on social media exposing, the regime of Israel. And so I'm happy the world knows that we're not sitting silent. I don't think they knew. I didn't, because not everybody has social media, right? So I hope my case got in front of enough people who feel like they're not being heard, who are living miserably in their refugee camps all over the world, Palestinians. And I just hope to God they saw my story and understand that we are here. We are not going to stop fighting for them. This is all in their honor. We're not going to stop fighting. We're not going to stop sharing posts. We're not going to stop, protesting in the streets and trying to change policy politically. And, we have more Palestinians now running for office here in the United States government and actually winning than ever. So it just, hang in there, stay strong, and know that we're here. We're working on your liberation and your freedom. We're working very, very, very hard, and I feel very confident that we're gonna get to where we need to get to sooner rather than later. I just feel it in my bones. We're going to bring bring big changes to what's happening in Palestine, just like the world did in South Africa. We're going to achieve that success in our lifetime. So all I can say to them is hang in there. We've got you. We got your backs.
Many South African liberation fighters who, by the way, they were sharing camps in Nigeria and Tanzania with Palestinian fighters. Never really, they had the hope that, and it's the hope that carried them that South Africa will be free. But they never really saw it that it's going to be this time, They always saw it as a dream far away. So for Palestinians, they should know that for South Africa, it's not a faraway story compared to theirs. It's very similar.
Absolutely.
We Palestine will be free as we were free.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for honoring the invitation and being part of this webinar. Thank you for being honest, for being genuine, for being sincere throughout this webinar. And I really feel like people who are watching and people who will watch after this will get some sort of inspiration in whatever activism that they are involved in, but more especially on the Palestinian question, that um, we can do more, and we will achieve what we really want. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Suhair on Facebook. She's very active on Facebook. And you can inbox any of the questions that you may have, follow-up questions. You can alternatively send it to us, we'll send it to her, and we'll put you in contact. But she's very responsive on Facebook. She's also on Twitter as well, and on Instagram. So find her there on the socials. And if you have questions, she'll be very much happy to answer. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to doing more work with you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. I know it's in the morning in the US. Enjoy the rest of your day. Our
Thank you.
audience in the African continent, enjoy your night. See you soon on this webinar series. Goodbye.